Hi all, I would like to show you now an example of a game that was played yesterday, and it's an example of a very interesting positional theme about restricting the freedom of your opponent's pieces, so trying to leave a piece completely out of play. And this happened yesterday in the game between Magnus Carlsen and the Dutch Grandmaster Luc van Wely. They are playing in the Ukraine, the Aerofit Force tournament. This game was played yesterday in the third round. Carlsen playing white. I'll go quite fast through the opening lines. It's a semi-Slavic with bishop g5 and exchanging on f6. And after this development moves, we see that, and that is right here, we see that the c8 bishop of black is his main concern, because that's the piece that is the most difficult to develop because of the black pawns placed on these right squares. So that means that he has to try to develop this bishop, and the main strategy of white is to prevent that. The bishop goes to b7, and now the c5 square becomes very, very important. Actually, from here on until almost the end of the game, this c5 square is the main the main theme, the most important square. White plays knight to e4 to control the c5 square as much as possible and prevent black from playing c6 c5. That's the idea, because if black would play c6 c5, then this bishop would be perfectly placed on this long diagonal. Queen to b6, still trying to move this pawn from c6 to c5. Rook c1 preventing it. Rook to d8. Rook to d1. Rook a to c8. So now we see that more and more pieces are placed that are directed to c5. So what black now is threatening is simply to advance this pawn, because we can count the pieces that white has to attack this. A c5 square is 1, 2, 3 and 4, and black has the same amount, 1, 2, 3 and 4. That means that black can play c5, and each time that white takes, then black can retake. So, seeing that now white cannot place another piece directed to c5, what he does is he simply occupies this square c5. This occupation of c5 involves a pawn sacrifice. Maybe you don't see it right now, but after a few moves you will see what I mean. This rook is exchanged, so that means that the defense of c5 is now not enough, so black takes here. But this was all seen by Magnus Carlsen, because if we compare now the pieces, we see that, well, of course, black has now one pawn more than white, but if we compare this rook with the black rook, we see that the white rook is much more active on this open d file. If we compare the light squared bishops, we see that this bishop is much more active than this ugly bishop on b7. And then these other two pieces, they are both actually well placed. The dark square bishop of black is active, controlling these dark squares, and the knight of white is looking at the center. So we can say that out of the three pieces, two of them are much better of white, and only one of them is equal. So that's the compensation for this sacrificed pawn. Rook to d7 is played now. Bishop goes to a8. Knight to e5, attacking twice this f7 weakness. Now Luc van Wely didn't want to restrict his pieces even more by playing rook to f8, for example, because then the activity of the white pieces would be so superior that he didn't want that. He played bishop to b6 here with the idea of advancing this c5 pawn, and still after this pawn falls here, then we see that white tries to control this c5 square. That's the whole idea. Let's continue. Bishop to c7, knight to c5, and now we see this ugly bishop on a8 that cannot go anywhere. So this is the main theme of the game, restricting the freedom of this bishop on of black. Now the kings go towards the center, and white keeps the c5 square controlled. Bishop takes e5, b takes e5, and now we can again evaluate the position. If we compare the two bishops, still the white bishop is much more stronger and has more freedom, more mobility than the black bishop, but we see also that black has now a pawn majority here, 2 pawns against 1, so black will be able maybe to create a passed pawn here on the queen side. White has a pawn majority on the king side, so white's strategy from now on will be, well, on one hand to keep the pressure on this c6 pawn, and on the other hand to try to create a passed pawn on the king side, and also to defend against this passed pawn of black later. Let's continue the game. Black is now trying to liberate his own bishop by playing b5, b4 with check. King goes to d2, king d7, bishop to e4, and the white king goes to the place where a possible passed pawn will be created. Now white prepares the move f2, f4 to create his own passed pawn, and there it is, f4, g4, f5. So now white has what he wanted to achieve, a passed pawn on the f file. The c6 weakness is still important. By playing bishop to e4, the black king has to stay defending this c6 pawn. Bishop to f7, bishop f5 check, king goes to e8, and now the g4 pawn has fallen. Bishop to d5 check, and the passed pawn of white becomes more dangerous. Now it's supported by the white bishop and also by these pawns of white, this g and h pawn that want to advance. Now of course we see that this pawn is attacked twice now, by the bishop and by the king, so it can be taken, but on the other hand this bishop, we can say, is also overloaded because it also has to defend this e4 pawn. Now in the game, at a certain point after h5, black decided simply to take here and to give this e4 pawn. Bishop goes to e8, defending c6, that's the base of the pawn chain, and we see that white has this new passed pawn, and black tries to create now a passed pawn on the queen side, but it's actually easy for white to capture this pawn. And in this position, Wely resigned because it's actually hopeless now to play this endgame. He has two pawns down, and he has a bad bishop against a good bishop, so it's hopeless. I hope you enjoyed this example, and I'll show you once more where it all started. It started right after the opening here, after the move bishop to b7, the fight for the control over the c5 square. That's the main theme of the game, all to try to leave this bishop on b7 out of play, restrict his freedom. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it, and leave a comment on YouTube, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.